Scott Hambrick, scotthambrick.com. Today, we're going to go over the first law of thought, the law of identity. I'm just going to read this blog post here. I don't normally prepare these little recordings, but I know that some people get me only through audio, so I'm going to see the blog post, and I don't really want to do this with extemporaneous speech because it needs to be fairly carefully done. So I'm just going to read this. Logic 2, the first law, the law of identity. In part 1 of this series, I described a very few of Aristotle's axioms. He believed that understanding a few primary things about being would allow us to build valid arguments and reasoning for everything that followed, which he called the posterior. In sum, being is. Aristotle ran into people who disagreed. He says, quote, "There are some who, as we have said, both themselves assert that it is possible for the same thing to be and not to be, and say that people can judge this to be the case." This is in Metaphysics, Book 4, Part 4. This kind of assertion makes me crazy. Aristotle wouldn't stand for it and makes a beautiful argument against this nonsense. He tells us that the instant someone makes an argument for the possibility of a thing both being and not being, he has made a positive statement that, in order to be true, must exist and can never not exist. Here's another way of saying it. If I show that a proof exists for the ability of a given thing to exist and not exist, at the same time that proof would not exist, so this being not being cannot be. Checkmate. Game to Aristotle, everything must be or not be. And knowing that this is true, we can build from there. Uncle Ari then moves on to definitions. He says that if we use a series of words to ascribe a meaning to the word man and define man, quote, "If such and such is a man, then if anything is a man, that will be what being a man is." Also from Metaphysics, Book 4, Part 4. There is only one true definition of any given thing, because if there were another definition, both wouldn't point to anything and would both be meaningless. Man has one meaning and is predicable of one subject. There are no other words that carry that meaning or predicate that subject. There can't be another definition that says unman is a man. In logic, any definition that was different than the original would be the unoriginal. Anything that isn't cola is the uncola. So I think we've already arrived. We can now proclaim that A equals A. This is the law of identity. L-O-I-D, Lloyd. In terms of universals, concepts, categories, a man is a man. A equals A. In terms of the particular, this baseball I hold is exactly like this baseball I'm holding, and not the same as other baseballs. Again, A equals A. This seems self-evident that A equals A. That's because it is. It's axiomatic. It's everywhere, and it should never be ignored. A is something. It can be the subject of any assertion. How about this? Man is the rational animal. Man is the subject both logically and grammatically. Grammar isn't just a set of weird rules your 8th grade teacher laid out. Grammar is designed to carefully convey conceptual information from one consciousness to another. In this sentence, the phrase, "is the rational animal," is the predicate both logically and grammatically, because it is something predicated of man. The rational mammal, the rational animal, is predicated of man. There are lots of things predicated of man, and all of the things predicated of man can get really crazy if we lose sight of the logical subject and start acting like A is not A. I think the main trap here is when we think those things predicated of man are definitive. They are not. There is one definition, and it tells us that A equals A. Don't let the bastards tell you otherwise. Now, my friend Carl messaged me, and let me get these text messages out. He read the post, and he always has interesting things to say. He says, man can mean lots of things, unless you're talking of the essence. We don't usually use language so precisely. I think the real trap lies earlier. Things can both be and not be at the same time. Men can be whatever I want man to be. And I say not for the purposes of logical argument. we probably, in my post here, I probably need to flesh out categories or essence more. He says, the essence isn't so easy to get to all the time. We talk sloppily. Victor at Jena, or Napoleon Bonaparte, or loser at Waterloo all apply to the same referent, but with different content. He says, or put it this way, are there black swans? If it's black, is it still a swan? And I say yes. The color wasn't the essence of the waterfowl, the swan. It was only accidental, what Aristotle would call accidental. He says, is an adult Dalmatian without spots a Dalmatian? And I say no, because the Dalmatians are in fact defined by their markings. Swans are defined by their morphology. So I think the law still stands. And he says the law does stand, but it's hard to figure out the essences of the things that we're talking about. And I agree with that. There are problems of language, but I think it's Descartes that said, before we discourse, we must first agree upon our definitions. I believe that was him. Let me look. I think that was him. And so when we're having these conversations and these debates and these discussions, we have to agree on our definitions. And once we agree on those, then they stand. A is A.